And we're live. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Solvable Mysteries podcast. My name is Juras. As every week, I'm joined by Glenn Highcove. How are you feeling on this Friday evening for you, man?
Man, yeah, I can't wait for the summer to start already. We're getting our our body surfing stuff together. I bought a full body. Me and my daughter both bought full body wetsuits, so like we're super excited to to try it out. But in the interim, I am really excited about the show tonight because once again, it's a case. I mean, if I had to say what this case kind of compares to in a way, this case was probably like the Delphi murders of the late 70s, but maybe in some ways bigger with some of the media coverage, for the era, in the pre-internet era.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be discussing the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. As you've said, it happened in late 70s on June 13th, 1977. So before jumping into the timeline of the case, I have prepared like a little cutout video from a news coverage of the case from back in the day. I think it covers a lot of good facts. I really want to play this for our audience. I think it will set up the stage even better. So I'm gonna play it. It's gonna be around 5 minutes. So strap in, grab some popcorn, whatever you wanna do, guys. And then after that, we'll continue into the timeline. So I'm playing it right now.
On June 13th, 1977, counselors at a Girl Scout camp in Locust Grove, Oklahoma, woke up to an unspeakable horror. 8-year-old Lori Farmer, 9-year-old Michele Guse, and 10-year-old Denise Milner had been brutally murdered. It was a crime that sparked a blaze of anger, mistrust, and mystery. Who would do such a thing? Authorities would charge a local man, a Cherokee Indian who'd broken out of the county jail 4 years earlier. His name was Gene Leroy Hart.
He had a history of several felonies. He had involving rape and kidnapping. He was he was in Mays County on post-conviction relief, sentencing relief, and that's why he was in Mays County. And he escaped from the jail there not once but twice. And then at the time of the Girl Scout murders, he'd been at large for more than 4 years.
It was probably the largest manhunt in the history of the state of Oklahoma, and that went on forever. There were all sorts of news reports about him being sighted at different places.
Hart knew his hometown terrain, and he had hundreds of relatives and friends who protected him. Because of this, Hart was able to evade authorities for 10 months. Garvin Isaacs, a Native American himself, will not say who asked him to represent Hart, but he took the case. It would be Isaacs' first murder trial, and he'd be up against a seasoned prosecutor from Tulsa County.
His mother's property was very, very close to the Girl Scout camp location, the Camp Scout location. And in this massive effort to uncover evidence, part of it would have involved items that were taken from the Girl Scout camp the same night as the homicides occurred. Some of these were found in a location called the Cellar Cave, and the Cellar Cave was attached to Gene Leroy Hart during that period of time as a hiding place while he had escaped through there was a witness who had put him there. But there was also physical evidence in the cave that not only tied him to the cave, the Cellar Cave as it was referred to, but also in that sense tied him to the items that had been taken during the same evening or night of these crimes. Additionally, there was a testimony concerning the hair. As I recall, the little Milner girl, her hands were taped with tape or duct tape, as I recall, and that a hair found embedded in the tape between the hands of the little girl matched in all characteristics Gene Leroy Hart's hair. Now, hair is not an absolute means of identification or accepted as an absolute means of identification, but when you take that along with other evidence, certainly it has probative value, and it did in this case, in my opinion.
They came with a lot of scientific evidence and a lot of claims, and all that was just, the evidence that they presented at the trial was based upon science, a lot of it, and we were able to show that it was not reliable. Just two quick examples. One, there's thumbprint on the flashlight, and it's not Hart's thumbprint. And then another piece of evidence was that there was a footprint in the blood in the tent. The footprint was, I think, a 9.5, and Hart's feet were 11.5. So you can't change your fingerprints or shrink your feet. So, you know, those are scientific pieces of evidence that fly in the face of the allegation.
We felt like there was a lot of manufactured evidence, a lot of sloppiness in the procedure.
Leila Ramsey was one of 6 women who sat on the jury that heard Hart's case. She remembers testimony from an Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation agent that created grave doubts.
Larry Bowles was on the stand being interviewed. I mean, we was on he was talking to the jury, and Garvin Isaacs asked him, said, "Were any pictures taken the day over there when they arrested Gene Hart?" And he said, "No, not any." He said, "You didn't take any pictures?" And they said, "No." We're sitting here looking at 8 by 10 glossies of that very man posed like he'd bagged a big game. He lied to us.
Jurors returned a verdict of not guilty. It was vindication for Hart and his supporters, but Ramsey says the jury's verdict actually had little to do with clearing Hart.
I'm not saying he's not guilty, but I am saying that the evidence showed he was not one person done by themselves. We all 12 agreed on that. That there was enough evidence to show that it had been more than one person.
Right, so that was the news clip from way back in the day, and we already have heard a lot of interesting names such as Gene Leroy Hart, who is the main suspect in this case. So without any further ado, I think we should just literally go through the timeline. By the way, dude, I had forgotten to, I think, share the screen with you, so I think you should be seeing what I'm seeing right now. Just confirm that that's the case.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, excellent. So yeah, let me just go through the timeline. As I've said, I have a lot of like visual assets for this week's show, so I'm gonna be trying to go through it as smooth as possible, because trust me guys, there's so many details, so many interesting details here. At the end of the day, I think we really need to figure out if Gene Leroy Hart is behind the murders of the 3 girls, or was there someone else involved, or perhaps even more than one person involved, because let's remember from the news clip that we've just seen, one of the jurors, the lady that spoke the last on that clip, she insists that there were more than one person involved in this case, and you know, I think I might agree with her, but let's discuss this after we cover the timeline. So it all happened, well, it all started on June 12th, 1977. And actually, this is like it happened, the murders happened on June 12th, 77. But like, let's bring it back, and I'm sure you've noticed that detail as well, because less than 2 months before the murders, a camp counselor discovered that her belongings had been ransacked and her donuts, of all things, had been stolen. Inside the empty donut box was a disturbing handwritten note stating in capital letters, quote, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in tent 1. The director of the camp sessions treated the note as a prank, and it was discarded." So have you ran into that like interesting note that was found on Camp Scott's like property 2 months before the killings, that someone is trying to kill 3 girls in tent 1?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because their reaction to it was to not take it seriously, apparently, and it's interesting to think if that would be different now if the same thing happened. I would say yes, but yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, perhaps, you know, who would have thought? I mean, back then maybe they didn't really think much of it, because this camp had no such incidents for approximately 50 years. But now let's jump to the day in question, which was June 12th, 1977. around 140 Girl Scouts departed from the Magic Empire Council building in Tulsa, Oklahoma, heading to Camp Scott. So we're already on the Google Maps here. And we could see the city of Tulsa is right here. And Camp Scott is pretty much this strip of land. So 140 Girl Scouts are departing from Tulsa to basically have their own, scouting, like vacation type of a thing. It was like a camp, pretty much, but it only lasted one day because on it started on June 12th, but on June 13th, every single person was evacuated, and in fact, the camp never reopened ever again. So the events that happened during the first day of camp pretty much, ran them out of business. So let's jump a little bit into who was the counselors who were in charge of the girls. And by the way, I want to jump immediately to a map. I think I have it here. So basically, this is the rough map of how the area looked. So for everyone who's listening to this on the podcast apps, as always, on the YouTube side of things, we are showing like the maps and other interesting things. So the murder, as you can see, like the campsite was comprised of many like smaller little camps, and all of these camps had names related to Native Americans. So we have Kiowa Camp, we have all of these other camps. Now, the murders happened in Kiowa, small little camp. So, a little quick question, dude. Since you've done scouting, and I would assume went on similar trips, does this look like a regular camping operation? I mean, to me, it looked like a big camping operation because there's a lot of kids here. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, maybe you have some. I want to ask your opinion here since you're like kind of the expert on these things.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, so I was definitely thinking about camps I'd been to, and I would say the camps that I'd been to two different like summer camps over different years. You know what I mean? So I would go multiple years to the same two camps.
Yeah.
And one was probably about twice the size of this, and then the other one was probably closer to this size. Yeah. So I mean, I think the one thing I wasn't clear with was like whether these girls, these young ladies, were all from like if they came as a troop. It almost doesn't sound like it. It's hard to understand exactly when it was described what the relationship everybody was to each other and whether they were just kind of randomly coming from their troops. I can say in Boy Scouts, you would actually come with your troop.
Right.
And maybe not everybody could afford or had the time to come, but there would be like maybe, 20 kids from each troop. So yeah, so and I think it was interesting too that as you're gonna explain, I think the different campsites that are named after the Indian tribes, the Native American tribes. We had something similar where like just for organizational purposes, because if you're at a camp, you're going to say like, well, where's my campsite? Well, you don't want a number, right? So it's kind of cool to have to have a name for it.
Exactly. Well, to that end, actually, the three girls, Lori Lee Farmer, Michele Heather Guse, and Doris Denise Milner, the ones that were murdered in this case, they didn't know each other, and I think they were like the only ones in Camp Kiowa that did not know each other. That's why they were staying in the last tent number 8, because every single tent had at least 4 members in it. Like it was one tent was made to house 4 kids. So, but this last tent only housed 3 kids, because I think in every single other tent, like the girls already knew each other. But in this one, this last tent, number 8, where these girls were staying at, they did not know each other. They were sort of grouped together, and one of them, I don't remember which one of them, but one of them was really feeling bad and tried to call home, I think on day 1 of the camp, which is, probably not an advanced camper. She was and I can't blame her. It seemed like a very different experience from like what regular kids are used to. Now let's move through the timeline a little bit. So I want to jump to another map, so we can see this is Camp Kiowa, pretty much enlarged. So this is the counselor's tent. This is where Carla Wilhite, who was 18, Suzanne Ewing, who was 18, and Dee Elder, who was 20, were staying. These three ladies in their late teens were the camp counselors for Camp Kiowa, and these are the tents. So this is tent 1, tent 2, tent 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now, a lot of like media outlets say that they were staying in tent 8, but they were actually staying in tent 7 because the counselor's tent, they didn't have like a number on their tent. So actually the numbered tents started from here. So let's just refer that the three victims were staying in tent 7 right here. And as we can see, like an interesting part already here is that from the counselors, because this is the showers, this is Kiowa campsite's shower building. And as you can see, man, the counselor's tent can pretty much oversee almost every single tent, but it can't really see tent 6 and definitely can't see tent 7. So I just want to quickly jump back to you. Do you think this is like a security issue right here, that a counselor's tent, the people who are in charge of the little kids, they can't really see one of the tents like completely? They would actually need to move like a lot in either the right or the left direction to even get a glimpse of the tent.
Yeah, I mean it's weird because it's so funny when you look at this map. Wow, like 80 yards looks way smaller than, you know what I mean, than it does on like a football field or something. I see what you're saying, that yeah, there's like a blind spot. Um, that layout though is pretty normal for summer camps. I mean, I guess it is a little weird that you said that's the shower building in the middle.
Yes.
Is that right? Oh, that's interesting. That it's interesting they even have a shower building in the middle. So maybe that's what's different. Is my Boy Scout camps, there was like maybe boys don't like to take showers. There was like maybe one shower building for the whole 100 and something boys, um, and not just per campsite. So that's interesting. There's like a little more infrastructure here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, given what happened, I mean, as we get into it, I'll have some more thoughts about security.
Right. At around 7 p.m. on June 12th, a thunderstorm hit the area, and all of these girls that were staying in these tents, they had to pretty much huddle up. I think they were already writing like letters back home. I think it was one of the camp's activities to write like letters, and like they were, I don't know, doing campsite activities. Now, so this is happening at 7 p.m. In the evening, everyone sort of have to huddle in because the rain is like pouring. So tent 7 was slightly apart from the other tents, and the view from the counselor's tent was obscured by the shower block. We already discussed this fact. Now, at some time before 10 p.m., the counselor of Comanche Camp saw a light in the forest moving north towards Kiowa Camp, but she was not sure what it was. So, like, let's jump to the bigger scale map. So, this is the Comanche Camp, right? And this is Kiowa Camp. And now, in the Comanche Camp, at 10 p.m. in the evening, one of the counselors from Comanche Camp actually sees a dim light somewhere here moving towards Kiowa Camp. So this is, a lot of people believe that this is actually the perpetrator or perpetrators moving in for the kill, or like to scope out Kiowa Camp. I actually have this area on the Google Earth map as well. This is, by the way, this strip right here is the strip of the camps, because from this picture we could see that the camps are like sort of ridged to the north, but they're actually just ridged to the west. It's just the way this particular, screenshot of the map was taken. So we could see that at 10 p.m., someone's moving towards the campsite, and a counselor from the Comanche camp, which was here, already spots that. Let's see what happens next. At around midnight, which is 12 a.m., Carla Wilhite escorted some of the girls from the toilets to their tent. So we don't really know if it was the victims. I didn't find this information. Perhaps not. Just some other girls, probably. 1:30 a.m. in the night. So this is June 13th already. The girls in tent 6 were warned by Carla Wilhite to stop making noise. At the same time, she heard a strange sound coming from behind the tents. It was described as a low, guttural sound, but she was not sure whether it was an animal or a human. When she shone her torch in the direction of the noise, it stopped. She then returned to her tent to sleep, but she continued hearing the strange noise like all night, pretty much, or like for a long period of time. And I want to jump back to our main suspect, Gene Leroy Hart. Now, he had escaped 4 years before the murders, and he was like at large for 4 years. But now, why he was in jail is because he had raped women, and while he was doing that, he was making very similar weird sounds. Okay, so this is the first connection, dude. 1:30 a.m. If you would look at the map, this is Camp 6. So somewhere behind Camp 6, one of the counselors is already hearing like strange noises at 1:30 a.m. on the Google Earth map. It would be somewhere here. Your thoughts? Anything you wanna add to that? I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, I mean it's really sinister and ghastly, really, when because you don't really know who's moaning, but whatever it is, it's not good. I mean, once again, it's interesting that it wasn't. This is, I think, one of a series of things we'll remark on. It wasn't taken seriously as
Yeah.
like a sign of distress or a sign of danger. So, but yeah, I think when we get to the sort of the prosecutorial phase of our discussion here, yeah, I think this is going to be a key clue.
Exactly. So at 3 a.m., there are 2 reports of girls in other camps being woken by noises. So other camps. So we're talking about not Kiowa camp, like noises most likely in the Comanche camp and probably in the Quapaw camp as well. One of the reports of these camps is of a single scream. But this is contested when it happened. It may have happened at 1 a.m., not 3 a.m. So it's choppy. We can't really link this to anything, I don't think, because there's a lot of girls think, young girls, someone's gonna scream regardless, even if they're not being killed. Someone may scream. So I don't really want to connect this because it didn't seem like it's a strong evidence point that connects to anything. There was a scream of one girl that was crying out for her mother, but once again, this could have been any girl, I think, or maybe it was the victims, who knows. But it's I would suggest moving past it. Around the same time, someone was moving through Kiowa camp, reaching into tents and stealing items, purses, and several pairs of prescription glasses, because these things went missing on the same night. The last story from a surviving witness is from the girls in tent 7. But now this tent 7, but this source is most likely talking about tent 6 in reality, so this tent right here. But this is probably one of the creepiest things I've ever heard. So I'll want your input here, man, because what happened in tent 6, this tent right here, during the night, is that the girls in this tent actually said that their tent flap was pulled back and the man shone a light into the tent. After a few seconds, the flap was replaced and he moved on to tent 7. So, like, this is most likely the killer. I mean, who else, right?
Yeah, I mean, it can't be a coincidence, right? But then once again, it's like they're not taking it seriously because maybe part of it is when you're a little kid like that, and let's face it, they are little kids. You sort of don't have power over yourself, and you're used to adults sort of imposing their will, I guess, and their schedule on them, on you as a little kid. So maybe that's why you don't feel so outraged. Well, maybe if it was older young ladies, in their teenage years, they would be more aware of like how inappropriate that is, in that situation, and right away that's a danger sign. But at this point, I'm chalking it up to them being really young.
Yeah, I would agree, man. Carla Wilhite's alarm went off at 6 a.m. So her clock alarm went off at 6 a.m. so that she could go to the showers before everyone wake up. So let's remember, the 3 counselors are staying here. This is the shower at 6 a.m. Carla wakes up to go to the showers. Now she would have to go outside from this angle, I would assume. And as she was walking, what happened next is pretty horrific. She headed east towards Quapaw Camp and the staff house, and on her way to the shower, found a girl's body in her sleeping bag in the forest. So, this is the area. This is like the geographically like correct area, at least if we're talking about like the directions of the compass. Since this is straightened out, she is heading from her counselor's tent, which is somewhere here, to the staff house, which was, I believe, this building right now. It's abandoned right now, but still. She was heading towards that, and on her way, she sees a dead girl in her sleeping bag, zipped up, I believe. Now, after realizing she had discovered a body, Carla immediately woke Dee and Suzanne, which were the other counselors, to help her with the check on the other children. Dee started by checking tent 8, so tent 7 in reality, you know what I mean? Because some of these sources really messed it up, so tent 7 in reality. And she quickly discovered that all 3 children were missing. So one of them was already found dead at that location. The other 2 were not in the tent anymore. On arriving at the body, the nurse of the camp checked for any signs of life, but it was clear the girl, later identified as Denise Milner, was already dead. She had head injuries and her hands were tied behind her back. Richard Day, who was the husband of camp's director, a woman named Barbara, arrived on the scene and discovered the other 2 bodies in the sleeping bags as well. Later, these would be confirmed as being Lori Farmer and Michele Guse. By 8 a.m. on the 13th, Sheriff Glenn Pete Weaver knew he would need the assistance of a larger force and requested help from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations. And I still have like some more timeline details, but this is gonna be like the more wide span timeline. Like I'm gonna be talking about like certain days, but this is like the events. These are the horrific events of June 12th and June 13th. Your thoughts before we move into the the further details?
I mean, it's interesting because this is one of those cases where, how on past cases, like, let's just say John Benet Ramsey for one of them, the police, sometimes they don't really seem to know when they're in over their heads, or sort of flounder around before they finally ask for more help. And in this case, it looks like the sheriff did the right thing, where he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm not at all equipped for this level crime, so I'm going to right away escalate it to professionals that have seen this more often." So that was one thing they did right. It was interesting though that apparently, from something I was watching, they said that maybe this is because this happened, on the immediate investigation. It actually took them a while to figure out that there was more than one body there. Like, the counselors didn't at all realize, they didn't even look in the other two sleeping bags. Um, and then, later when the sheriffs get there, I think it took some amount of time before they realized, that there was a bigger murder scene. And just think, I mean, if I'm not saying this happened, but if the other two victims had been in, like not dead yet, right? Had been in maybe a critical state, or a state where they could have been, gotten to some kind of medical treatment to save their lives, well, that would have been, a pretty dangerous delay. I don't have any evidence that that's what happened. But this is why when they find a dead body, they almost always call an ambulance, because just they want to really make sure there's no chance of saving that person, before they, call it a
Yeah.
day. So yeah.
Yeah, that's that's a really good point. I didn't really think of it in that way. Uh, I wonder why they didn't locate the bodies immediately. I didn't really find the information in regards to how close the bodies were to each other. I just have the rough area that it was somewhere here in the map. So jumping forward into the timeline, now on the same day, June 13th, was actually the last day of Camp Scott. It never reopened again, and it has been hosting Girl Scouts camping activities for 50 years. So, whoever did the killings, they pretty much ran these people out of business as well. Now, on June 14th, 1977, so the following day, a wooden floor platform of tent number 7, where the girls were murdered, not where they were murdered, most likely, because we don't know where they were actually murdered, but where they were living. So, tent number 7, a wooden floor platform, is actually airlifted to a crime lab. Now, the floor is covered in blood. The perpetrators appear to have attempted, or perpetrators, because we don't really know how many people did it. And I actually kind of am leaning towards that this may have been more than one person. I think we will still discuss this later on the show, why I think this way. Now, so the perp appeared to have attempted to wipe out the blood using towels and mattresses. And against the wishes of investigators, this information was actually published in the press, and in particular, the detail that a tennis shoe print is found outside of tent number 7, somewhere outside of here, and a different print was found inside the tent. So, dude, we have two completely different shoe prints, one inside of the tent and one outside of the tent. You want to add anything there before we move forward?
No, I mean, it's interesting that they were at least able to, even back then, it's gather some good amount of data. It's sort of funny how sometimes I almost, I don't know if everyone else is like this on who watches our show or listens to the podcast. Sometimes it's almost amazing how good they were at collecting, evidence, like the pre-DNA era.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're going to see, I think, is there's a lot of amazing, I guess, forensic science, given what they weren't able to do back then. So, yeah.
I was surprised. I'm not gonna lie. I was surprised by it as well. Now, on the 15th of June, Sid Wise, Mays County DA, is publicly outraged that the press published this information about the different shoe prints, because perhaps he was trying to keep this a secret, maybe, for their own investigative purposes. A man was arrested as well on the same day, I believe, who was living 7 miles north of this camp. He was living in his car. That's why they arrested him. He was questioned, but then he was released. I think they quickly realized that this man probably was not connected to this case. The investigation turns to a ranch just west of Camp Scott, owned by Tulsan, a man from Tulsa, Jack Shroff. Now, Shroff had items stolen from his cabin, which may have had a connection to the murders. And I want to quickly jump to the map for everyone to see. This is the approximate location of where his cabin was. I don't, because things have changed over the last 50 years, so I don't know, maybe it was part of this building complex or this building complex. I'm pretty sure it's somewhere here, just to give everyone like a visual, a good visual to look at the map, see where this is all happening, because this is where the victims' bodies are found, and as the crow fly, we could actually do a quick look. What's the distance? It's like about a mile. It's like not a full mile as the crow fly. So, now what was stolen from Jack Shroff's camp that could have connected to the case was actually duct tape. Duct tape and I believe ropes. And this is why during the research, my initial thoughts were like, wait, is Jack Shroff involved in the murders of these girls? Because I'm pretty certain some sources state that it was the exact items used in the killings were taken from his camp. So I was like, isn't this guy a suspect? And from my research, they questioned the guy and they cleared him pretty early on the case. Your thoughts about that? I mean, I didn't find anything interesting regarding Jack Shroff, only that the items apparently belonged to him.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think you're right that like if you have physical evidence that links a person or a person's property to a crime scene, the due diligence would be to talk to him and just try to ascertain like how did these things that were your property come to be part of a horrible triple murder. But yeah, it does sound like given what else they knew about what was going on in this area, then yeah, they must. I didn't find anything else necessarily that said what was exculpatory, but there must have been something that weighed in his favor. Maybe a combination of like character references, and maybe he had a real alibi. I will say that this is interesting because this is starting to paint a picture, and maybe this is a good future case. There's a famous campsite murder that happened in the past couple of years in my neck of the woods, actually not far from our Mitrice Richardson case. I mean, almost a stone's throw from it. And I think there's going to be some parallels when we do that show with what was going on here with like this kind of ongoing issue of somebody, some potentially roaming the area and committing different levels of crimes.
This is good. This is a good setup, man. I can't really wait to discuss which case this is because I have no idea. And I think we'd have to do it shortly down the line. Now, at this day, I think we're still on the 15th. So 2 or 3 days after the murders, the man Gene Leroy Hart is first mentioned by the investigation that, he is a suspect. This man has been at large for 4 years. By the way, this is gonna play a part. If we're gonna quickly look at the Google Earth map, Gene Leroy Hart's mother lived here. This is the house. Somewhere, one of these homes, this is where the main suspect's mother lived, okay? And Gene grew up here. He knew these areas very well. So that's also another important factor. I want to quickly measure as the crow flies how far away from the murder scene Gene's mother lived. And it's
Oh
only
wow.
only 1 mile. Only 1 mile,
It's
dude.
it, this is basically his friggin' backyard, right? I mean, this is, you know, I mean, for an area that is this geographically remote and really low density, and given the amount of freedom he must have had to wander around there as a younger person or earlier in his life. Yeah, I mean, this is like, you know, if he was a Viet Cong, this would be his jungle, right?
Exactly, man. You're correct here. Uh, Another interesting thing happened with the dogs, and I wouldn't have included this in the timeline, but I have to discuss and I have to ask because I don't know you will be aware of this little detail. So I will read this out and I will want your take on it because for me this was like this is some voodoo stuff. So let's go. On the 16th, so 3 days after the murders, Wonder Dogs, as they were dubbed by the media, came from Pennsylvania. Now, these dogs were very, very expensive FBI dogs or something like that, and they could like sniff very well. That's why they were called Wonder Dogs. Now, they came, and it was determined with their help that the killer or killers must have passed by the counselor's tent in order to get to tent 8. What this tells us immediately is that most likely the dim light seen at 8 to 10 p.m. in the evening that was moving towards Camp Kiowa was most likely related to the murders, because if the person with the dim light or the persons with the dim light were moving towards the camp, from here they would have to pass the counselor's tent, which was somewhere here, to get to tent 7. So, you know, that's an interesting point, but this is not like the interesting point, the most interesting point. The most interesting point is that these dogs, somewhere down the line, this is it. Let me just, yep. It was rumored that that it no one knows for a fact when it happened, but it was rumored that sometime between the 16th and the 18th, a local Cherokee medicine man, because let's remember, Gene Leroy Hart. Gene Leroy Hart was a Cherokee man, you know, a Native American. So Native Americans were already kind of outraged a little bit that the police was kind of publicly setting up one of their own, you know, fellow Native Americans as this murderer. So one of the medicine men of Cherokee had placed a curse on the tracker dogs, you know, the Wonder Dogs, and he said that the dogs will die soon. And later, in the same day, most likely on the 18th of June, one of the tracking dogs actually dies from heat prostration, whatever that is. And then another one later on in the timeline runs somewhere and actually runs into the cars, into the traffic, and is killed. So 2 of them literally died during the investigation after a Cherokee man placed a curse. Is this a coincidence or what is this, man?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I'm not laughing, but I'm just it's what I'm going to say next kind of gives me a little nostalgia. So on YouTube, on this case, when I was doing the research, there was a book that was written about this whole case called "Someone Cry for the Children: The Girl Scout Murders." And then in the 90s, so in like 82 or something, they did this book. And then 1993, there's like this long kind of like TV documentary, and like is amazing. Like one of the voiceover people was Johnny Cash. Which do you know who Johnny Cash is?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. Anyway, you know, pretty big time country, you know, country music star. Anyways, this documentary being very 1990s, because 1990s I always think of as kind of into like its paranormal stuff. There was like a really strong slant in terms of the coverage about like kind of Native American like spiritualism and like I guess I don't know if you call it magic, I guess kind of magic and paranormal stuff associated with it. And that came up. But then it was interesting because it was saying that a couple of the investigators, they were also Native American, like Cherokee background, and said that they like to combat this, they went to medicine men and they got like their own kind of like counter magic charms to help track him down. So, but it
Whoa.
is, yeah, it is really eerie that like the dogs, like not only, yeah, like I said, not only did they die, but they kind of covered it again. That like at one point you said, like you said, there, there's leveled up super, expert dogs. They just stopped. They just stopped in the middle of tracking and just completely lost his scent. And it was like this guy had been elusive like this for 4 years, but now when they really, really wanted him, I mean, I don't know why they didn't put this much effort into finding him before, given the horrible stuff he'd already done. But yeah, yeah, it was like it's there's kind of it makes an interesting little bit of paranormal that we don't normally have on a case like this. And we're being sensitive to it because it was kind of one of the main allegations in sort of the folk story about this tale that surrounds it. Like this is a little bit different than just this random escaped prisoner doing something. There's kind of this whole other element of local culture to it.
Exactly. What a great point you just added. The next thing, because during the timeline we have a lot of like back and forth from like the investigation and the press and the local Cherokee people, and they're all beefing. They're all beefing because people think that the Cherokees think that the press is setting up Gene Leroy Hart. Now, the investigation thinks that the press is releasing too much information. The investigators are infighting. It's a whole mess, okay? It's a whole mess. I don't want to go into it because it's just going to confuse us and it's not going to give us anything we need to know. A lot of people are fighting because the publicity is like literally Delphi murders level publicity, but from back in the day. I want to read a news page clip or something like that, right? And it's gonna give us some interesting information about three caves. Three caves that Gene Leroy Hart is connected, and the items found in each one of these caves. I want to quickly read this. This is going to be very important. I have on the Google Earth map as well the general locations of the caves. I just want to quickly read it for the audience. I think everyone is going to find this very interesting. So I'm reading like the newspaper from like back in 77, I think. So let's go. Three caves south of Locust Grove being a town. A little quick backstory. Locust Grove is this town right here on the Google map. It was literally very close, only like a handful of miles to the campsite. It was pretty much the biggest town next to the campsite. As I was reading the newspaper, three caves south of Locust Grove near Camp Scott have figured in the Girl Scouts murder case. Have figured meaning in, back in the day, way of saying that they had connection to the case. So cave 1, the first cave out of the three caves, about 3 miles from the camp on Spring Creek, is about 100 feet from a cellar and foundation that was the boyhood home of Gene Leroy Hart, I think referring to the mother's house that we already talked about. Gene Leroy Hart, who was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Lori Lee Farmer, Michele Guse, and Doris Denise Milner. It is at this particular cave, Cave 1, the investigators, basically the cave was discovered by squirrel hunters about 4 days after the murders, and in this particular cave, they found evidence linked to the crime scene. So let's remember, this cave is really close to Gene's mother's home, and in that cave they found these items: a counselor's sunglasses, masking tape, a green plastic similar to that on a flashlight found near the bodies, a newspaper from the same edition as newspaper inside the battery compartment of the flashlight were found, because let's remember, there was this big red flashlight found next to the bodies, and inside of that flashlight in the battery compartment there were news clippings, a little bit of like newspaper to sort of wedge in the batteries, and those news clippings were taken from a newspaper that was found inside of the cave that was literally almost next to the house of Gene Leroy Hart's mother's house. Dude, I think you have some more information about the red flashlight. Was it like a thing back in the day for scouts to have like these red flashlights?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I know I had like a special little Boy Scout flashlight. The flashlight that I saw in the picture, I got this like this nostalgia when I saw it. I kind of forgot about it. So when you're like a little kid, everything that like the grown-ups have is like something special, right? So like if you go for a walk at night with your family or something, and like mommy or daddy has the flashlight, you're like, I want to hold the flashlight. So I just remember there's like, I think they still exist, but you know how like now you can get all these really powerful flashlights that run off of like a double A or maybe C batteries. Well, back then, technology wasn't as good. They didn't really have like the strong LED lights and stuff. So yeah, there's like this really big kind of like a giant flashlight that you would have to hold from like a handle on the top. And I can't even think of like what the battery was called. It was like a battery that was like almost the size of your fist. You know what I mean? So that's what it looked like to me in the picture that I saw. And apparently it makes sense that like with something like that, you would have to wedge like paper and crap in there, maybe if the inside like molding had, deteriorated at all for stuff to shake around.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's like an industrial strength flashlight. And back then, flashlights just didn't last as long as they do now. They weren't as powerful.
Right.
So that's like a Pro Tools flashlight.
Interesting. I didn't know this. By the way, why Gene Leroy Hart was actually linked to this cave is because a former convict said he and Hart actually hid in this cave back in 73 after they escaped from Mayors County Jail. Really quickly, going back to the Google Maps, right? This is Mayors County Jail, right here in the city of Pryor. Okay, so that's just a little piece of information. Going back to the newspaper, authorities also found two weeded up wedding photographs, which Gene Leroy Hart apparently developed in 1968 while at Granite State Reformatory. So this is happening in K1. I mean, they found wedding pictures that Gene Leroy Hart developed himself in the cave right next to his mother's home, and inside of that cave was also a newspaper, and parts of that newspaper were wedged in a flashlight, and the flashlight was left at the crime scene. Is in my opinion, like, this almost sounds like case closed here, guys. But I will continue on. But obviously, we're still doing this case. But like, in your opinion, dude, isn't this like case closed?
Yeah, I mean, between this and the other stuff you're going to mention, this guy just leaves stuff all over the place, right? He's definitely not like he's the kind of criminal I don't see using gloves. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Cave 2. Now we're talking about Cave 2. I'm still reading the newspaper. Cave 2, a ledge along Skunk Mountain, about 2 miles from the camp, is where a farmer named Victor Auxier reported he saw a man he thought was Gene Leroy Hart about a week after the murder. So someone very similar to Gene is still spotted around, the general area. And fun fact, since the camp is massive, I mean, I don't know, maybe you've been to like bigger camps, but like it's like a pretty big camp. For a crime scene, it's a big crime scene. Actually, law enforcement, they had ordered another security firm, so security guards, to like secure the area because it was so massive. And now the security guards actually reported seeing silhouettes, okay? Silhouettes in the forest of, I don't know, like a man, and like lights and like weird noises and footprints of a man. So someone, after the murders, someone was stalking the campsite. And now we have a farmer, Victor Auxier, reporting a week after the murders he thinks he may saw Gene Leroy Hart in the area. So, I mean, this looks like the guy not only did this, but actually sticked around for a while, which is, it definitely tells a lot. If he really did that, it really tells a lot about him. Moving forward in the newspaper, I'm like almost done here. This cave is on the ridge overlooking Leroy's Hart's mother's home. Authorities discovered a boot print in this cave, which matched the boot print found in the tent number 7, outside the farmhouse. Also linked to the death scene was also a boot print. They also connected it. And also this boot print was also connected to a grocery store at Sam Corners. Sam Corner, I think, is like a little town or something like that. And this grocery store was burglarized shortly after the murders. And also, the burglary is actually linked to Gene Leroy Hart. Once again, really quickly, back into the Google Earth here. This is Sam Corner store. It's somewhere here. So it's quite close to the general location. A cigarette butt taken from Cave 2. There was a cigarette butt left at Cave 2. Was tested for saliva, and a chemist determined that it had been smoked by a person with type O blood, the same blood type that Gene Leroy Hart had. So really quickly, because I'm not aware about like blood types, dude, I want to ask for your input. Is like type O blood a very rare blood type? Because I have zero idea.
No, that's a good point. So just, it's, because this is pre-DNA testing, they had to kind of try to triangulate, different things. Like they would try to do things like maybe saliva types, I think at one point, things about your saliva. There was other chemistry things that they tried to narrow in. O is actually, I think, the most common blood type. So that would be one thing. And that guy's in the suspects' corners, he'll say, well, most people have type O blood, or the majority do. I think type O is the type that can give blood, like if you need to donate blood. I think type O, if I'm correct, type O positive at least, can give blood to everybody.
Okay.
Maybe someone else, maybe one of our viewers will write in the comments and say, oh no, but I think it's the most flexible.
Okay, so it's not like a super critical detail, I would say. But there was also a hair removed from a bandage found at this cave 2, and it had the characteristics of Hart's hair. I don't think they did DNA, as you've said. They were not doing DNA back then, but like the hair looked very similar to Hart's hair. And also finishing off the paper, authorities also linked a Vienna sausage can taken from a pond on Victor Auxierre's property near Cave 2 to the burglarized grocery at Sam's Corner. So that's how they connect, most likely, Gene Leroy Hart to that burglary at the corner store. The price marking on the can reportedly matched price markings on items at the grocery. Cave number 3, the last cave, is about 1 mile from the camp, located on property owned by Jack Schroef, the same man whose property had the duct tape that was stolen and then later on put like on the victims, right? On the victim mouth and things like that. So the property was owned by Jack Sheriff, like near the cave, and in that cave, a young jail inmate led authorities to that cave in late July, saying he actually met with Hart at the cave after the murders. So apparently, Gene Leroy Hart was not only still. He wasn't like trying to hide, he was actually hanging out with other inmates, like future inmates. So he was well connected with like a lot of let's say shady people. That's why I actually believe that maybe he may have taken one of them with him on this crime. It was in this cave that officers found a taunting message, and this is the one I will want your input on. I think we've discussed this a little bit. The message in this cave was, quote, "The killer was here, bye-bye fools, 77, July 17th. Authorities numbered the caves in the sequence they were discovered, but theorized the person who used them went from the Schroef house to the camp to cave 1, then cave 3, and then cave 2. But now going back to the message, this is the exact picture, dude. So it says, "The killer was here, bye-bye fools," on the 17th. Now the killings happened on either the 12th or the 13th, so like 3 or 4 days after the killings. In a cave, apparently, a message says, "The killer was here, bye-bye fools." So do you think this is the same killer? Like, is this message connected to the killings? And if it is, do you think Gene Leroy Hart actually left this message in a cave?
I personally, yeah, I do. I mean, I think it matches probably some of the stuff that's theorized about his personality, and maybe some kind of general theory about why certain criminals do certain crimes.
Exactly. Okay, so we're done with that. And yeah, given throughout the timeline, a lot of other things actually happened. Before I jump to those things, just to finish off, this is the location of Cave 2 and Cave 3. So this is somewhere where the Cave 2 and Cave 3 was. So one of these caves, let's remember, had this message. Some other caves were in here. This is Cave 1, I believe. I think this is the same cave, maybe the same cave where they found the picture, the wedding picture that Gene Leroy Hart had developed. I know a lot of things happened after the fact. Once again, some more infighting, other stuff. I want to quickly jump to how the search ended for Gene Leroy Hart, because there was a massive manhunt for the man after these killings. Sketches were posted online. I mean, not online, obviously, just in the news media. At 4:15 p.m. on April 6th, 1978, so the next year, on April 6th, a team of 8 OSBI, which is Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations, agents actually stormed a house in a remote area of the southeast corner, Cherokee County, near Bunch, a town of Bunch, Oklahoma. The residence belonged to a man named Sam Pigeon and was located 45 miles away from Camp Scott. Gene Leroy Hart was arrested without incident. Hart was transported directly to the Oklahoma State Penitentiary at McAllister. I have in the maps, in the Google map, this is the area. Apparently this is where they captured him. So it was quite a bit of farther away. And yeah, they captured him because someone had informed that Gene Leroy Hart was staying at another man's home called Sam Pigeon. Sam Pigeon was also a Cherokee Native American, and I believe Sam Pigeon thought that, or at least he told the police, he fully believed that Gene Leroy Hart was innocent. That's why he let him stay at his crib, pretty much. So yeah, he was like captured, and from that news clip that we've heard, they kind of pronounced him not guilty of the crimes, and there was a lot of back and forth. Actually, I believe the prosecutors, they didn't have enough evidence to connect him to the crimes. Maybe because of DNA back in the day, they couldn't connect him, and yeah, pretty much he was declared not guilty. Obviously, he was still having to serve 305 years for his previous crimes, so it's not like he was going anywhere. He actually died in jail 2 months later while working out. He had a heart attack and then he died. So that's pretty much the story here. We have some more points to discuss. Yeah, dude, I think you wanna.
Yeah, actually, let me take a little bit of the load off you, because you've done such a marathon with laying it out. I can tack on a little bit for the end piece. So this is just based on some of the research, especially that one show that I mentioned. So yeah, like specifically at some point the investigators, before they catch him, they're like, yeah, for sure he's being harbored by this community. I mean, the show says, and this is going to be one of the really depressing aspects of this case, this guy becomes this convicted rapist, and I believe, was he even a convicted murderer at this point? That's what I found stuff about the rapes, but had he also been convicted? What was his sentence for?
I'm not sure
precisely. Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a little bit vague.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard some really grisly, ghastly details about the two pregnant women that he raped, and details about that, but he had a massive sentence. He had essentially a life sentence. He'd been on a run already for 4 years and had successfully, I mean, he must have got bored. I mean, that's I mean, as we get into like what we think happened, I mean, this is how horrible this guy is, that even when he's free, he can't seem to make good on his second chance that he shouldn't have had. But yeah, so the investigators are getting really frustrated. They're going to Medicine Man. They're at one point, what seems to turn the tide for them was one of the investigators basically threatens the wife of somebody. I think it was the guy who was harboring him, and says, look, like, here's what's going to happen is it's a year later, and the fathers of these girls are and they all had different kind of semi-important jobs in some cases. They're really mad, and they've kind of kept their temper until now, but they're starting to lose it. And you know what? We're just going to give them like your names. Like, it was a bluff. He wasn't actually going to do that, but it worked. So this lady cracks, and she gives them a lead, and then they go and, they raid the house. The guy tried to get away. Like he opened the door and saw them and tried to run. They had to like tackle him. But then, yeah, this trial phase, I mean, here's another intersection of pop culture. This was kind of like this local area's like, it was their version of, I would almost compare it to the OJ trial, like in this little microcosm of their part of the because OJ obviously was a big kind of cross country event, maybe even a worldwide event. This trial was really had a lot of attention on it in the area, and I guess this is what's depressing, especially for the families of the victims, is this guy become this weird folk hero, I guess, because he's on the run and evading the police, and the community is taking up for him and saying, oh, they're framing him, and this evidence is too convenient. It was almost like there was too much evidence during the trial. But the thing the victims noticed was the victims families come to watch the trial, and they're sitting in restaurants, and there's like collection plates and collection cups, like things people can put money in for this guy. And they're like, wait a minute, who's the victim here? This guy's the victim? Like, we're the ones that lost our daughters, and this rapist is some kind of hero? And then when they have the trial, here's the thing. So, I say this maybe more for our international audience at this point, because probably the U.S. audience already knows this. But one of the issues is that when you have a trial as a defendant, you have a couple of choices. So one of the choices is whether you have a jury trial or not. So if you think people are going to be sympathetic to you, you probably want a jury trial, because a jury might be easier to fool or see it your way than a judge who sees guilty people every day, in theory. And on top of that, you can say, suppose you did something really heinous. So suppose it had been the opposite. Suppose he had done something to like a Cherokee, and they're not on the reservation. They're out here in kind of U.S. territory. Suppose you're like, oh my gosh, the whole jury is going to come from that town, and even the judge lives in that town. Well, then your defense attorney could ask for what's called a change of venue, to take it to like a different part of the state. Like that's happened before for plenty of famous cases. So what's unfortunate for the prosecution, so the ones making the case, is that they don't have that choice. So here they are having this trial in this town, in this area, and it's very obvious that the entire place is biased in favor of this scumbag, and they can't do anything about it. Like, they can't, unless short of like things that are very obviously going to end up in a mistrial. They can't change the venue as prosecutors, at least not back then. Maybe the laws have changed, maybe it's different in different states, but that was what I got from the research I did. So it's almost like there's this term called kangaroo court. Kangaroo court is when it's sort of a farce. The trial's a farce, but usually they mean that where someone gets quote unquote railroaded, where let's say an innocent person gets found guilty, just sort of rubber stamped through and never really had a chance. Well, it was almost the opposite. It was like a kangaroo court in favor of this guy. So there was a lot of allegations that like the evidence was falsified or planted. There was someone that worked for the sheriff who was fired from the jail years ago that alleged that he had seen those photos, those wedding photos, in the sheriff's drawer, like after Gene had already been on the run, and that was found to be false. They actually had like a receipt of the property, that he had coming in and out of the jail. So there's no way he would have had those photos. It was just a bunch of stuff, but basically they did a good job of doing a bad thing, a good job of making it look like, there was the evidence was just a little too good, and there was a little bit too much evidence, and that there was, like, oh, a real criminal wouldn't leave, because all these things, like these women's glasses, like every time they would find someplace this guy was at, they would find another pair of like stolen, women's glasses. Even when they arrested him, he had women's glasses on him. Like, this guy was keeping these keepsakes of places that he robbed. And, obviously he had like a weird set of fetishes and stuff. And that was part of what was driving him. I would wager we'll get into it after this, but as we just discuss it further, but clearly there were multiple motivations making him do this, because a smart person, a sane person, would have probably left the area and not hung around for 4 years and not,
Yes,
been anywhere near a
exactly.
Girl Scout camps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that was just to finish this off. Yeah. So it ended up being a whole travesty of a trial. I mean, if you think that he was guilty, which we'll get into in a second, then the only silver lining was this dummy went back to jail for another, in theory, 300 years. But then
Yeah.
he dies. He died. Basically, he does like he did a big weight workout, and then he went jogging and he dropped dead. And and he had spent most of the previous 5 years or so free, right? So that's not really any consolation for the family, and they don't, like with cases like this, you often have time for the person to sort of regret things and tell you the truth, and steam in jail for a while. Like, none of this happened. So
I wanna I wanna
that's my
add,
two cents.
dude, that's excellent. That's a really good roundup. I want to add one thing. I'm not sure if you heard about this, but one of the victims' father stated that he believes when Gene Leroy Hart died after that workout in prison, he believes that this was divine justice. Have you heard about that?
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I think I don't know if I've seen that quote, but um, yeah, I mean, I guess that's one way to look at it. Is
Yeah.
he met his just desserts, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're actually almost done. I guess with the script. I'm surprised we went through the timeline fairly well. I think all of the most interesting points were mentioned, but not all of them yet. Not all of them yet, guys. We have the questions. As always, we have a few questions. Now, my questions are basically: is he responsible for the murders? Because we didn't really state our opinions yet. We only said that we, think that he most likely did it. I will say, I think he did it mainly because of the newspaper and the photograph being at the same place, like in the cave, and he literally did the photograph. He literally developed the photograph in prison, and it was found, the photograph. So that photograph came from him. I don't care what anyone says. I think that photograph came from him. And then there was the newspaper with like cutouts, and those cutouts were in the flashlight that was left at the scene. I mean, you put 2 and 2 together and you get your answer. So I think he's responsible. So your thoughts, would you say that you think that Gene Leroy killed the 3 victims?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, like you said, there's all these different pieces of evidence, even things that literally there was like a receipt for him getting on the way out of prison. I think that was what I was alluding to earlier, that he there wasn't anything the sheriff had kept. You have property, you get it on your way out in prison, and they do paperwork around it. But also all these other things that he was known to have done in previous crimes, and then you look at like the whole area. Well, here's a horrible crime that's really kind of like nothing else that happens around that area. And there just happens to be this guy that's been on the run for 4 years from like a stone's throw away from that camp. His mom lives there. He's grown up in the area this whole life. And, it just so happens, what a coincidence. Some horrible rapist is on the loose. And look what happened, something just like that, except, even like on the next level, which is maybe, the next level, along with this taking of items and this fetishism around, I guess, the property of, ladies and victims and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. But then again, and I think you found some information. I really want to bring this up. Let's remember that there was semen found, right?
Yeah. I'll go make it even more specific.
Yeah.
There was sperm found in the sample. So at least, like sperm you can see with a microscope. So you didn't need a DNA test. While they couldn't DNA test it, they could look at the sperm and they could notice some aspects of it and how like one man's sperm might differ from another man's sperm. That for sure they've been looking at that for a long time. Well, so that was the whole this is the case closed because Gene had a vasectomy, and it turns out after they arrested him and they gave him a little check, it turned out that vasectomy wasn't really so successful. No, he was still producing sperm. He was still producing sperm, and just so people understand, sperm are the cells that carry your DNA. Semen is the fluid that they swim in. So the transmission fluid. So even people that have vasectomies still produce semen. They still make the whole thing is you're cutting off when you do this surgery. You're cutting off the tube that populates the semen with the gametes, the sexual the thing that covers that carries your DNA and chromosomes.
Okay.
So that turned out to be, but unfortunately that was such a red herring.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I can imagine some amount of people who, don't worry, before this is done, I'm gonna rip them a new one. But some amount of those people were probably still under the impression that was, that they hadn't heard the news, and they were, oh no, see, he had the surgery, so it couldn't have been him.
Okay. Right. That's a real good point. A few other questions here. Basically, I don't know if we. Goddamn, I already forgot if I know that I asked about this, but I don't remember your answer, so I will ask you again. Obviously, sorry to all the audience members if I'm asking this for the second time, but do we think that the note found in Camp Scott 2 months before the murders is connected to the murders? So if we believe that Gene Leroy Hart killed the girls, do we think that he was also the same guy who stole donuts and left in the donut case a note that said, "We want to kill 3 girls from tent 1"? And then he actually was speaking through tents on July 13th or like July 12th, and he saw, tent 6 has 4 girls, not gonna do it here. Went to tent 7, 3 girls, just as in the note 2 months ago. I'll kill them.
Yeah, it almost begs a question in return, like, why would he do that? And I think the answer is, it could be complicated, or it could be something really simple. I think, just to answer your question, yes. I think it was him. I think he was arrogant. I think that dysfunctional people and psychopathic people and disturbed people that do these things, it's no good if they don't either brag about it. No good to them, I'd say, in their minds. They need to be able to brag about it. And also, I think some amount of those people like inflicting fear. So,
okay.
That's that stereotype, right? That it's not necessarily true, but some people say people that commit sex crimes only do so because they like the power of it. And that's found to not be really true. It is actually, to some degree, the sexual gratification for them. But yeah, no, there is that element. There is somebody, for whatever reason, it's a person that's a bully, right? So in a way, they're bullying. But here, I want to actually posit this to you, Juras. Do you think when someone does this, do you think that it's ever someone who's saying, because I've seen this before, it almost reminds me of the scene from No Country for Old Men where he's flipping the coin. Do you think that sometimes people like that, they try to justify it to themselves? They say, you know what, if God doesn't want this, or some other force, it doesn't have to be God, whoever it is, I'm gonna give him a chance. I'm gonna stop me now, stop me before I do something terrible. And then when nobody stops me, then it was meant to be. You guys, you know what I mean? It's almost like absolving themselves of some of the blame and displacing some of that blame on someone else or on God or whoever it is. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I actually can't answer because it would make sense if you're crazy and you
Yeah.
know that you are doing bad things, but you can't help it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're gonna kill, you're gonna do it anyways, even though you realize it's a bad thing. But if you're crazy and you can't help it, maybe it does make sense. Maybe they do think, if God doesn't want this, then he's gonna stop me. You know what I mean? So maybe he did steal those donuts and he wrote the message, and in the back of his head he's like, if God, or like whoever he was like thinking of as a higher power, if he was even doing that in the first place, maybe he in the back of his head was like, I left the note, I put my intentions out there. If the higher force doesn't want this to happen, someone will catch me. Maybe that was the case. I don't know. It's a good point. I have another question. This is the last question. I want your input as well here. Last question that I've wrote down before, I guess, jumping to the theories, which I think the theories is going to be quite short. At least I think I'm leaning to a pretty straightforward direction here. The last question is, and I think the most important question to ask, to be honest, were there more than one killer involved? And before I let you tell your side of the answer here, I want to just add these 2 points, or like a handful of points that would make us think there is more than one killer here. So the first point is, there was more than one weapon used in the killings, as well as different knots were used to tie the girls as well. So that's interesting. Would the killer be using different knots and then different weapons? I don't know. Then let's remember the footprints. At least 2 different footprints were found, unknown footprints that could be connected to the case. 2 different footprints, not 1 but 2. So that almost like answers the question right here, unless one of those footprints are actually unrelated to the killings. Who knows? The jury unanimously agreed that there were sufficient evidence that prove there were more than one person involved. So the jury unanimously agreed on this, that there is more than one person involved. And then lastly, I think it was said somewhere that during the killings, the blows to the girls were dealt from the left, like when you hold the weapon from a left hand, and then also when you hold a weapon from the right hand. So from 2 hands. So it's like, it almost says to us that if there were 2 people, one of the person was left-handed and the other person was right-handed. Like, that's, what I'm trying to say here. So given all of this information, I will say, I think there were more than 2 people, because more than 1 people, because Gene Leroy Hart, like, as we already found out, he was staying in these caves with like future inmates, future criminals. So I wouldn't put it past him bringing someone else like with him, to do this crime. Your thoughts?
I mean, those are all good points. I could see how that would make one think that. The only reason why I'm going to just personally, I'm going to say no, and maybe I have a stubborn opinion on this, is I feel like the kind of crime it was, and the victim type, and then the relatively low population density there. I mean, you make a good point that he was, hanging out with scumbags that do scumbag things. But I feel like even in that group of people, I could be wrong, but I feel like it's relatively rare to find somebody who's going to be willing to do this specific crime, in that age group. And, just that there wasn't, I mean, there was, I guess, some evidence found potentially that someone else was involved, but not, I don't think anything like, as much forensic evidence as just what seemed to point to him. So yeah, I'm just going to say no. I don't think so. I think it was just him.
Right. Excellent. And then lastly, we are, jumping to the theories part. So the theories, literally, like the theories that I had was either Gene Leroy Hart killed the girls, or him and someone else. That I do am leaning a little bit towards that maybe he did bring someone else to this. But then again, a lot of the criminals, they would be not into doing like these disgusting things to like girls, because let's remember they were like sexually abused as well. So that's like another thing. He not just killed girls, he also like did creepy stuff. So I don't think a lot of like inmates would be up for that. So that's another strong point for your line of thinking. Other theories were Jack Schroff was involved, the owner of the farm, which I don't think he was, because they cleared him pretty early. And then there was also some theories that Richard Day, the husband of the director of the camp, a woman named Barbara, was somehow also maybe involved, because he was the one who found the bodies, while the counselors of Kiowa camp didn't manage to find the other two bodies. But he was also cleared. I know this for a fact. He was cleared as well. So to answer that, I will say Gene Leroy Hart killed the girls. That's my verdict from all I've seen over this week of researching this case. I will say I'm leaning towards that Gene Leroy Hart is the one who killed them. So that's how I would answer that. I'm gonna throw it back to you now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I would, I want to go doing this percentage thing the past couple shows. 100%, 100%. I think he did it. I don't have a doubt in my mind. I'll even soapbox a little bit for a second and say that, the more I found out about how the people from this area and his community supported him, and, the fact this jury of friggin' idiots, let him off the hook. I mean, that whole community should be ashamed of themselves. I mean, if anybody's listening, I mean, obviously anybody that was actually there and part of that community would be pretty ancient by now. But if you're listening, you should you could go hang yourself or something. I don't know. It's really, really horrible people to do that, to support someone like that. I have a big bone to pick with people that support criminals, but especially a terrible one like this. And I know there's always going to be people that kind of offer these justifications. No, well, did you the like whataboutism? Well, what about when this happened to this community? What, I don't care. It has nothing to do with these three little girls. These three little girls and their families were victimized. And there's no historical justification. There's no justification you can put on there about other bad things that happened that justifies doing something bad to someone that had nothing to do with it, wasn't part of some kind of system or supremacy or whatever. It wasn't. These are really the little girls that had a perfectly reasonable expectation to be able to go to camp, and it sounds like they were already having a little bit of a rough time because the weather was bad and they were feeling lonely and homesick. 2 weeks is a really long time to be at camp. So yeah, I kind of really resent. I have a high sense of outrage about this whole case. Almost, I'd say like Casey Anthony level in terms of like stupid juries, and definitely having served on a couple juries myself, I have a very low opinion of people acting in a reasonable manner on these things. So I actually speak from experience. Yeah, so that was it. I mean, would it be okay? I had one other kind of parting thought,
of course.
which is not so angry. I would say that we've done a couple of cases now about the 70s, and it does give me, because I was basically I was born in the 70s, and I have a little bit of nostalgia for that era. It's kind of interesting. When I was watching this, I was like, gosh, was it something like this that made the Friday the 13th movies? I don't know if you're familiar with those.
Of course.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know. I'm kind of dating myself, but it was these movies about kind of these slasher movies about summer camp, and I was like, gosh, did this inspire it? And it actually made me go down a little rabbit hole. And no, turned out it wasn't. I think it just back then, the whole topic of summer camp was just more ripe for stories in general. So you had other movies like Meatballs. Whenever I think of like summer camp movies, I think of like two of them, Meatballs and The Parent Trap. I don't know if you've ever seen the old 60s, The Parent Trap, but there's like a prominent summer camp scene.
Yeah.
Probably like act one is the summer camp. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you think about it, this was something that probably Americans specifically, maybe the rest of the world too, but Americans at this point of the time did a lot more. And now you have kind of all these other things competing for that time, but it's almost like a relic in some ways of another era. And it did also make me look back. I would say that in terms of liability, it is interesting that people were kind of naive. You had a whole camp full of, kind of defenseless girls and women that really they didn't even take serious any danger to themselves, because apparently this wasn't something that was known to happen. I would bet things like this had happened at other camps, at least some amount of assault and thefts and things like that. I asked my dad in closing, about this because, he went to summer camp with me a bunch of those years and I was in scouts, and, he would remember. And I was like, gosh, did they have like any kind of security at these camps we were at, even though they were in remote locations? I mean, so was this, right? So, and he was like, yeah, no, not. I mean, there was like a little bit of like a kind of a fire watch, like some adults that would be up at night just to kind of make sure the camp didn't burn down. But there wasn't this, worrying about outsiders coming into the camp. And I'll mention that, like, at least one of the places I went to camp out, Catalina Island, had multiple camps on the island, plus, people living on the island. So it wasn't like, you were just in the middle of nowhere. It is interesting how, once again, it goes to show you how when people's expectations are that, people aren't going to be horrible antisocial scumbags, their defenses are down. And that's unfortunately exactly what someone looking to do something terrible, and the reasons for why they're doing that. What would be really been interesting as a follow-up maybe is if we could ever find information on Gene and his background and what made him a monster like this, right? Because this isn't a normal criminal. This is somebody that's doing, doing crimes that even other criminals would find repulsive.
Exactly.
So, yeah, what made him do this? What made him ruin his own life and everyone else's? All right, so that's all I got, man.
That's good, man. That's excellent. As always, we all appreciate your feedback. And yeah, a lot of good points. And your last point, especially, leave your thoughts in the comments, guys, who are watching this on the YouTube channel, who are listening to this on the podcast apps. Please leave a rating, because I'm actually checking the ratings. We're getting some of the ratings. Leave what kind of rating that you want to leave. I don't care if it's like 5 or 1 stars. I'm just kind of fascinated by the ratings on there. So yeah, it would really make me a lot happier if I see like new ratings, whatever they may be. I don't even care about the stars, just the ratings, the numbers. And basically, yeah, that's all for this week. A lot of interesting topics left to cover for us. We're approaching episode number 100. We already have picked out what we're doing for episode number 100. It's gonna be a case that we've done already, but I actually leave in the comments as well, what case do you think we're gonna be doing for 100? I'm actually curious to see if people will find out earlier than that, but we still have 99 before that, like next week. We don't know what we're doing then for that show. As always, guys, thank you so much for listening. Leave a like, leave a subscribe or whatever if you feel like doing that, and we will catch you next week when we're talking about some more cool cases. I hope everyone's gonna have a good rest of the week. Finish strong, guys, and we'll talk to you very soon. Take it easy and peace out.